actually have almost always been a person who has mixed together an academic career and an athletic interest. And it goes back all the way to my childhood, I suppose. I can remember that my mother, for example, although I was an average high school football player, she had her own eligibility standards, that I'd have to bring back my own eligibility because she didn't want me to have my studies to be suffering from the fact that I was involved in football. But I have always had those two things mixed together, and felt that it was a very good way to do the whole aspect of education. It was something there. The time I really first came to a realization of the importance of the combination of academics and citizenship and athletics was when I was invited to make a speech at a very, very big banquet honoring a very good small college basketball team. And as I knew the players, and I knew who they were and what they stood for, and at the same time there was a big emphasis in the newspapers about the Final Four and the basketball at a totally different level. And I came to the realization as I made that speech that in some ways I was more impressed by the small college group than I was by the big-time athletics. And I looked at them and I saw that there's a way that you could look at them and see them in terms of whole persons as opposed to just athletes, and to realize that in some ways they were more All-American than the people from the big-time program. And as I made that speech, it became part of my thinking, and it led to, I think, a significant element in my interest in getting involved in the concepts of Division III. It all began when we, in Central College, won the national championship in football. And I attended that ball game in Georgia, and in that process met a number of people, one of whom was the top small college coach in the country, who was the treasurer of the NCAA. It wasn't very long after I met him and he saw that I had been a coach, that how much I knew about the athletics and about football, he needed to have an appointment of a president to serve on a steering committee of the small college group that was called the Division III. And he asked me if I would be willing to serve on it, and I did. One of the members of that group had actually heard me make the speech that I made reference to, and knew that I had some very significant distinctions between different kinds of emphasis on athletics, suggested that I give a talk about philosophy of athletics, which I did. And I put that paper and made that presentation, and it was quite successful. And that led to a committee being formed, of which I was the chair, to start working on the writing of a philosophy of Division III. And in that process, I drafted the first document and worked with the group to modify it and bring it into actual fact. And I also did the political work, as you can appreciate an organization like the NCAA takes a lot of political maneuvering and communicating to get something like that passed. First few years, there developed an understanding on the part of many people that Division III was characterized by no scholarships. And it was troubling to everyone, I think, including the Iowa Conference, the schools of the Iowa Conference, to be defined negatively. What you didn't do. We didn't give scholarships, but we wanted to be defined at what we did do. And that was to participate in the educational process for young people with some very clear understandings in the development of a philosophy that made it much more much more unified and compatible to work with each other. We're more similar in our approach, and at that time there was many dual memberships, but an institution would be a member of the NAIA and the NCAA and try to play one against the other. And when you played in a conference tournament or in determining the conference champion, you were playing different approaches and different things. So it was a unifying and I think an integrating process to have a similar track on which you're running in effect. I think we're still growing, we're still learning things, but I think there is still a very clear-cut advantage to the concept of Division III. The whole approach in which education is the keystone to what you're doing is an extremely important one and needs to be developed and is still threatened by certain institutions who tend to want to obey the rules of Division III, but don't really accept a philosophy that tends to unify them. The general public, I think, tends to think that Division III is a lesser division. It's 1, 2, and then 3. And I suppose it's true that the offensive linemen are a little smaller than they are in the big time, and in the secondary they're a little slower than Division I. But in general, if you look at the whole concept in terms of what you have when you have a student athlete in Division III, is that Division III has the advantages of good athletics, but it has something in addition. That whole emphasis upon academics and upon the nature of the persons that are doing it. Division III is basically concerned with the participants. Division I is basically concerned with the spectators. And there's a whole lot of difference there in terms of the role of education and what's happening to young people. I really believe, and my experience has tended to reinforce that the person who has both academics and athletics tends to rise to higher heights and higher citizenship and higher accomplishments than those who simply emphasize the whole emphasis on athletics. So I guess rather than thinking that Division III is lower than Division I, I'd say Division III has a plus, has something in addition that Division I does not have in the same degree.